Believe it or not, Deltarune Chapter 3 is fast approaching. Going off the newsletters, I wouldn't be surprised if it'll be released within the next 2 years or so. So before the chapter comes out, I'm going to make a predictions video that will be pointless to watch once it's actually released. Good thing I'm the first one to do it. For these predictions, I'm going to try to not go into wishlist territory too much. What I mean by this is that I want to make as many educated guesses as possible based on facts that we already know about the chapter. I'm not going to try to guess deep lore or certain pieces of character development. I may make another video on unlikely predictions, but for this video, I'm going to try to predict content that is the most likely to happen. So no, Clover is not going to make an appearance. Okay, first things first, the theme. I'm pretty sure most people at this point can all agree that this dark world is most certainly going to be a TV land. Not only with the cliffhanger at the end of chapter 2, but also everything from the Spamton sweepstakes to chapter 3 concept art. It's all screaming that this dark world will revolve around television somehow. How exactly? Well, I'm thinking that this chapter is probably going to be the most minigame and gameplay filled out of all of them. Not only has Toby stated that in past newsletters that this chapter isn't going to be a standard chapter like we're used to, it's going to have a lot more wacky gameplay elements that haven't been present so far, which coincidentally made the chapter a lot harder to develop. I'm predicting that most of the time spent in this chapter won't be so much dialogue filled and more so focus on minigames. The possibilities with being a TV land dark world is pretty much endless so long as it's on TV. I'm expecting a lot of references to classic shows like perhaps Simpsons, Mickey Mouse, Looney Tunes, SpongeBob, and also iconic reality TV shows like maybe Seinfeld or Full House. Based on a preview from the Spamton sweepstakes, it looks like a Western show might have been in the plans to appear in this chapter as well. Based on the newsletter, it appears to be scrapped at this point, although it might appear. We really don't know at this point. I think the Western outfits being previewed is almost direct confirmation that there's probably going to be a lot of parodies appearing in the chapter. Remember that chapter 2 was based around the internet, and Birdley's character dynamic was perfect for that. There were plenty of references to internet and meme culture throughout the chapter, so I'm expecting chapter 3 to do the same thing, but with television. I'm not sure how Toriel's character dynamic will be handled in the TV dark world, especially since based on dialogue from previous chapters, the TV doesn't get used a lot in their house. Toriel is more of a bookworm, so perhaps someone else from the light world will visit the dark world too. I think the character that fits the most for this is definitely Mettaton. However, I'm not really expecting him to come because for one, he hasn't been built up in the light world at all yet, and also based on the preview screenshots of chapter 4 we got from the status update, it's implied that Chris's family is weird, which is leading me to believe that Asgore might also be joining us in the dark world too. Now, the kind of TV shows I'm expecting to appear here the most in this chapter is definitely game shows. Game shows are the absolute perfect type of show to appear in TV land because it will allow for a lot of minigames and interesting gameplay dynamics to appear, which, as we stated, is what this chapter is trying to go for. Perhaps if Asgore is coming into this chapter, there can be a dating game show to allow proper character development between Toriel and Asgore's divorce. Perhaps there can be a game show parodying shows like The Price is Right, Jeopardy, or Wheel of Fortune. Perhaps a big one could be a show like Wipeout, which requires the player to not be wiped out. The one I want to see the most though is just a game show answering lore questions about the Undertale continuity. The chances of this are low considering this chapter is meant to be all about unique gameplay elements, with chapter 4 being more standard, but to be honest, a quiz game show about Undertale designed by Toby Fox himself would be so peak. Not only would it be able to give more insight about questions lingering in the community for so long, but would be a great way to test the player's knowledge about the Undertale canon. But as I said, chapter 4 is meant to be a much more standard chapter, and speaking of chapter 4, if you're expecting the light world to function similarly to chapter 1 and 2 in chapter 3, don't. Based on the previews of chapter 4, that chapter seems to be, for whatever reason, really focused on the light world, which is leading me to believe that most lore related questions will probably be somewhat answered, teased, explained in chapter 4 as in comparison to chapter 3. My prediction is that chapter 3 is likely going to end as soon as the Dark Fountain is closed. This will give more light world content for chapter 4, and also based off this line that Susie says in chapter 4 mentioning how Chris's family is weird, I'm willing to bet that this is right off the heels of chapter 3. I wouldn't say that we won't get a dark world in chapter 4, but I'm willing to bet it'll probably be a much shorter dark world than other chapters. Going back to chapter 3 though, let's discuss some characters appearing in the chapter. Unlike chapter 4 and beyond, I think we can go ahead and grasp an idea of what the characters are going to be in chapter 3. For starters, we already know a character character named Tenna and something called Cathode's crew are in the game, as well as the weather people who are officially named Lalino and Elena. Elena? El-Nina. Why did I fuck that up in the script? With Lanino and El-Nina, that confirms that there will be something regarding news and weather reports in their chapter as well. It would be really fucking funny if we got a Fox News parody. I'm just saying, Toby Fox. As for Tenna, I know a lot of the community is torn on whether Tenna is going to be the antagonist of chapter 3 like Queen and King, or if they're going to be the secret boss. And to be honest, I'm fully expecting them to be the secret boss at this point. The reasoning for this is because currently Deltarune is fully setting up chess as a main theme across his chapters, even carrying over from chapter 1 to chapter 2 with Queen and the Knight still consistently being a lurking danger. It would be incredibly weird for chapter 3 to just abandon the chess theme and introduce Tenna as the main antagonist instead. I mean, maybe they're in disguise and their real name is a chess piece, but I'm more betting on them being a secret boss. As for our chess piece antagonist, it's kinda hard to predict what chess piece they're actually going to be. After studying the rules of chess just for this specific video, what the hell am I doing with my life? I've come to realize that King and Queen's personalities don't really reflect the rules of chess, like, at all. Meaning that they basically just have the names of chess pieces, and that's about it. However, I'm willing to bet the name of Deltarune Chapter 3's antagonist. Their name is going to be Pawn. Why? I don't know, but it would be funny if I was right. Okay, so maybe I can't predict their chess piece, but I can predict their design. The main antagonists of Chapter 1 and 2, and Lancer, all seem to follow the same color format of blue, black, and white. I'm willing to bet our pawn, or whatever chess piece they're going to be, is probably also going to be blue, black, and white, just for the sake of consistency. I swear to God, Toby just seems like the kind of guy to make this entire consistency pointless and mean absolutely nothing. And Toby, if you ruin the consistency, I will personally make a mod that changes this character's sprite sheet to blue, black, and white, and that'll be the only way I play that chapter from then on, and I will go out of my way to commission artists to draw the character in blue, black, and white just so I can be satisfied. Anyway, another character that I'm pretty sure is destined to appear or at the very least get mentioned is Mike. We pretty much have hard proof of his existence at this point and some of his lore, being a friend of Spamton's and then Cathode's crew eventually doing something horrible to him. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mike's name is at least going to appear multiple times, especially considering Mike's name originates from the commercial Mike's Big Shot Soda. And since that's a commercial and this dark world is TV land, that lines up perfectly. Now we have two other characters that are very likely to appear, both from the Valentine's Day newsletter. So in the Valentine's Day newsletter, we got Valentine's Day cards from random characters in Undertale and Deltarune. Everyone got something different, except there are two characters in the Valentine's Day cards that we've never seen before, nor do they have designs to them. One of them went sorta big on Twitter, with based on how this character spoke, many people assumed it was Gaster. I think it's just completely up in the air if you believe it's Gaster or not. Me personally, I don't really think it is, but it's anyone's guess at this point. There isn't much to go off of. If it isn't Gaster, then it's highly likely that this character is going to play a role in Chapter 3. And the reason I say that is because while this letter was the one that blew up, there was another letter that did the exact same thing. And that one is definitely going to be a Deltarune Chapter 3 character. This letter follows the same format as the other letter and doesn't have a character to go along with it. However, it does mention AMVs, which is leading me to believe that video editing as a concept is likely going to be very prevalent in Chapter 3 as well. I'm expecting there to be an entire part of the chapter centered around video production, editing, screenplay, and acting, and perhaps the creation of movies as well. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the plot of the chapter revolved around the fact that some sort of movie is going to be made. The topic and presentation of what the movie is going to be about is hard to say, but movies are likely going to be a prevalent topic, and just like TV shows, expect some references too. Wouldn't be surprised if there was a parody of Avengers at some point. Speaking of parodies, how about Susie Zilla? If everything I just said is true, this chapter definitely won't be too lore heavy or dialogue heavy. For a release date, to put it simply, don't expect it to come out this year. I think the Undertale and Deltarune community likes to say every year that a new chapter is coming out, and then they set their expectations that a new chapter is destined to come out on that year, and then end up disappointed when it doesn't happen. I mean, hey, if it does come out this year, I'll be extremely pleased, but I think a more likely candidate is next year, for Undertale's 10-year anniversary. 10-year anniversaries always tend to be big events when they come around found in media. Naturally, I think if Undertale is having its 10-year anniversary, it makes the most logical sense to do something massive for it. What better way to celebrate the 10-year anniversary is by releasing 2 new Deltarune chapters. And while I think Chapter 4 is definitely going to be done way before the 10-year anniversary, I think realistically that date is probably the safest assumption. Of course, if it does release this year, that's great, but don't go expecting it and then get upset when this year's anniversary is just another merch drop.